The US military operation in Afghanistan has officially ended. The last flight carrying American soldiers out of the country departed on Monday night, in line with a troop withdrawal deadline agreed between Washington and the Taliban. More than 100,000 Afghans and 3,500 US soldiers and allied service members were killed during the 20-year conflict. But while the war is over, the suffering of Afghans may continue unless the Taliban can come through on their promises to form an inclusive government and revive the economy. Mobin Nasir reports.
Fireworks and flares lit up the sky over Kabul as the last foreign soldiers flew out of Afghanistan. It marked the end of a 20-year war by the US and its allies. The next morning, Taliban leaders arrived on the tarmac, announcing their victory and an intent to establish diplomatic relations with all countries.
The Americans failed here. From the military perspective, they failed to achieve their goals. But the Islamic Emirates of Afghanistan wants to have good relations with the whole world on behalf of the nation. We want to have strong diplomatic relations with all, including the United States.
Many Afghans are hopeful the fighters will keep their promises to end fighting, revive the economy, and establish a representative government.
The U.S. withdrawal was the last demand of the Taliban. Last night there were many gunshots fired into the air that were irritating for the people. It created fear. I hope they don't do such things again. I hope that now, after the U.S. withdrawal is completed, they will try to bring a nationwide peace.
It's good that Americans withdrew from the country. They must let Afghans discuss how they will form a government.
But international observers say coming through on these promises may be a tall order.
The organization probably hasn't shared many of its fundamental ideas and will continue to be pretty fundamentalist in its outlook. But at the same time is being pushed by the pragmatic necessities of governance to actually trying to figure out some sort of political accommodation.
Establishing peace could be difficult because former Vice President Amrullah Saleh, along with fighters led by Ahmad Massoud in the Panjshir Valley, say they will continue to fight the Taliban. Efforts to boost the economy have been hampered after the US froze most of the country's $9.5 billion in foreign exchange reserves. And many other governments have cut aid to Afghanistan. 14 million people are struggling to put food on the table, according to the World Food Programme. Almost half of the population lives below the poverty line, and decades of conflict have left infrastructure in ruins, with very few industries operating.
There are no jobs. That is why the people are worried. The Taliban should try to create jobs and provide education.
Neighboring Pakistan, which has been home to millions of Afghan refugees for decades, is calling for humanitarian aid to the country to resume.
The international community must remain engaged. Humanitarian assistance must flow. Do not let the economic collapse in Afghanistan take place. Vacuum is in nobody's interest. Instability is in nobody's interest. Exodus of refugees cannot be stopped within the region.
But Western governments and international lenders say their relations with the country will depend on what the Taliban does next.
The
Taliban want to install a new government, and this will give us an indication whether our request that it be inclusive is met. We think it is important also to represent the part of the Afghan society that is not represented by the Taliban. And we will see how the Taliban will take that into consideration.
Even if these conditions are met, there are no guarantees that foreign funding will resume under the Taliban. And the group says it will ban the cultivation of poppies, which has been a major source of income during the conflict. Many educated Afghans have also fled the country, fearing draconian measures like those imposed during the Taliban's previous stint in power between 1996 and 2001.
I think a lot of the people who are probably leaving are, the managerial class, the kind of people who actually help run the country. And if the Taliban doesn't have any of those people left, they're going to really struggle to rebuild the national economy.
The country is already teetering on the edge of a humanitarian disaster, and millions of Afghans find themselves living under a government that has no money or expertise. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Let's get more on this now with social development expert and former Afghan government advisor, Dr. Mohammad Najeeb Azizi. He was also the chairman of Afghanistan's Telecom Regulatory Authority, and he joins us now from an undisclosed location to protect his safety. Welcome to the program, Doctor. We saw there the US officially end its 20-year war with Afghanistan with the departure of the final US military aircraft. Can I start by asking you to reflect on the legacy that the US leaves behind? Do you believe that Afghanistan is in a better place than it was before the invasion?
There is no doubt that Afghanistan has progressed a lot in the last 20 years. The ending of this war is not the way anybody would have desired to have it. I'm sure that the US policymakers are looking at it that way, as well as the Afghans are looking at it that way. In particular, the Afghan population feel that they are betrayed and they are sold out without having a price tag known to them, and without knowing that who has bought them. With all these things, I do understand that Afghanistan has massively seen progress in the social development, in the economic prosperity, in the establishment of the infrastructure, as well as the institutions. However, today, the Taliban are the reality or the only power existing in Afghanistan. And they are facing massive challenges, and they have to come up their own plans on how to now run this country and how to move on and make sure that the achievements that have been brought in place in the last 20 years will remain intact, and they will build upon it and they will not destroy it.
Can I ask you about some of the more immediate challenges that the Taliban is facing in the wake of their takeover? We saw that billions upon billions of dollars in funds have been frozen to Afghanistan, from its foreign currency reserves to foreign aid from the likes of the US, the European Union, and international organizations like the IMF and the World Bank. That's resulted in soaring prices of everyday goods. Money is running out, and we're also seeing the currency falling in value. What does the Taliban need to do right now in order to bring some measure of stability to the economy in Afghanistan?
See, economy cannot be seen as a standalone item. Economy and economic stability depends on the political stability of the country. What I understand, the most important thing for the Taliban is that they have to keep their promise, and they have to come up with an inclusive and broad-based government that is representative of the majority of the citizens of Afghanistan. And once the political structure is in place, and the political structure that is acceptable to the Afghans, as well as that gives the opportunity to the Taliban to get engaged with international community in order to discuss on how to receive the international support, both financial as well as political. So once this is in place, the Taliban will be able, through the government, to stabilize the financial institutions and the financial market of Afghanistan. Of course, this is not the end of the war. At the moment, the Afghan government is not bankrupt. Still, the financial institutions are operating. The fear that we had that the Afghani currency may get devalued very quickly is not happening, which means that still there is a trust between the people and the financial institutions, and still people are believing that there will be positive news coming out, and in particular, once the political vacuum is filled out and the institutions start running, the purchasing power at the moment for the people is getting close to zero, because the salaries have not been disbursed. The banks have not been able to issue the checks or honor the checks that people have been bringing into them. So these are the challenges that they are having at the moment. However, the good news is that there is pretty much security in the country, except for the resistance that is coming out and getting shape and Panjshir. And I hope that as the discussions are going on between the two parties, that once the future political structure of Afghanistan exhibit the inclusivity of everybody, I hope that there will not be any need for the resistance, and everybody would feel comfortable, and they will see themselves in the upcoming political structure of the country.
Okay. Just really quickly, Doctor, we know when the Taliban was last in power, they were known for their oppression and brutality against women and girls. They weren't allowed to participate in everyday life in Afghanistan. Girls weren't allowed to be educated. A lot of Western nations are saying that this cannot happen again in order for them to be recognized by any government around the world. Do you believe that the Taliban is taking that on board and they'll no longer have those hardline measures in place?
Frankly speaking, the attitude of the Taliban in the last 10 days shows that the Taliban version 2.0 is a more progressive version. Of course, it's too early to make a conclusive remark. However, I do understand that the Taliban realized that in order to run the country in a smooth manner, both for the political and economic stability of the country and for the development of the country, they need to respect the rights of the citizenries, and they have to give space for everybody to express themselves. There should be the freedom of speech and freedom of expression opportunities available to people, and people should be able to express their concerns without any fear. Now, saying that, of course, the Taliban also realized that unfortunately over 50% of the Afghan population is living in poverty at the moment. Food insecurity is a huge concern, and they need to get humanitarian assistance, and the humanitarian assistance cannot come only from the pro-Taliban countries. They need the Western countries to make a major contribution in such an efforts. So therefore, they would respect, and I think they have already given us some of the indications that are ready to compromise some of their hardline stances that they had in the past.
Dr. Mohammad Najeeb Azizi, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much again for sharing with us your thoughts on Money Talks.